Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Texas Instruments Australia webinar tutorial event specifically tailored for Australian students studying the mathematical methods and/or specialist mathematics courses with the support of TI-nspire CAS technology. We have two highly experienced and expert teachers as your panelists this evening, and I'm delighted to welcome Stephen Crouch and James Mott. I will hand you over to the first of our presenters. That will be Stephen, who you see on your left there. The aim tonight is to set you up to some of the basic setup techniques and particularly clever tricks and skills, shortcuts for your calculator. All yours, Stephen.
Excellent, thank you. Well, as Brian said, good evening everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first student tutorial series for 2020. James and I are really excited to be presenting some really useful tips and tricks that you can use through your methods and specialist course throughout the course of this year. So first things first is when you switch on your calculator, you will see this screen. This is what we call the home screen. Now on my emulator software, I've actually got the CX2 CAS. Those of you that have the CX CAS, the non-2 version, the majority of what I do today will be pretty much exactly the same. So if you see an option on my screen that you don't have on your calculator, you probably have the CX CAS, and it's fine if you haven't got that option on yours. So first things first is to get to the mode settings from the home screen. So I press the on button and it turns on the calculator. I simply press 5, or I can navigate using the arrow keys to settings. So I'm going to go down to settings, which is number 5, and press enter. And then I can go to 2, which is document settings, and here's where we get our document settings. So I'm going to quickly look through the different options of here and explain what they mean so you can make an informed choice as to what suits your needs best. And float 3 is what I've got mine on currently. I'm going to go up all the way to float. So a quick demonstration, or rather explanation as to what these mean. Float is basically saying what is the maximum amount of digits you want to get in an answer. For example, if I leave my calculator in float 4 mode and I ask it to calculate 4/3 as an approximate value, it will display 1.333. So that's 4 digits. If I ask it to calculate 2 on 5, on the other hand, it will just say 0.4. So float basically says what is the maximum number of digits to be displayed in a result. The other option is fix. Now fix will always display the amount of decimal places given by the number here. So for example, if I say fix 3 and I ask the calculator to please do 1/3, it will just give me 0.333. If I ask it to do 2 on 5, it will do 0.400. So it will always display the number of digits, decimal digits equal to the number at the end. Personally, I like to leave that mode on float, because what that means is that it displays the maximum number of decimal digits required for that particular problem. So the next one is the angle, which is radian. Now in methods and specialists, the majority of questions and scenarios require radians. However, if you do want to use degrees, you can quickly change it over there. You can change it to degrees and so on and so forth. The new CX2 CAS actually has a feature where you can change from radians to degrees very easily within a problem. I will get to that in a minute. The next one we want is exponential format. And by the way, just a quick aside, as you noticed, I used the tab button. So the tab button gets you quickly between things. It's a very handy button to use for navigating around your screen and around applications. For exponential format, for our purposes as methods and specialist students, normal will do us just fine. So I'll leave it on normal. For real or complex, for the majority of cases, leaving it on rectangular would be preferred. If you're just a method student and you're not doing specialist, then you can leave it on real, and that's fine as well. But if you're doing specialist, you definitely want to keep it on rectangular. This is talking about the system of Cartesian coordinates, whether you want it in a plus bi, which is rectangular form, or do you want it in the r cis theta form, which is polar. So I'll leave mine in rectangular there. Calculation mode, this one, there's a personal preference really here, whether you can leave it in auto or exact. The quick difference between them really is that auto will always display exact answers unless the question itself has a decimal in it. So if I ask the calculator to solve a particular equation and it has a decimal in it, then the calculator will default to give back a decimal answer. Whereas if I leave it in exact form, regardless of the input I put into my calculator, I will always get an exact value back. You must remember that the golden words for both methods and specialist is that exact answers must always be provided unless otherwise specified when we're talking about numerical answers to questions. So personally, I prefer to keep my calculator exact, but keeping it in auto is fine as well. You just have to keep in mind that if your input contains decimals, your output will also contain decimals as well. You can also use keep it in exact mode, and if you want a particular question to give a decimal answer, you can then use Control and Enter to get that result. Okay, so now for the CX2 CAS, there's the CAS mode option here. The CAS mode you can keep it on, you preferably leave it on. Then there's exact arithmetic and there's off. So exact arithmetic and off is not really recommended for VCE level. So exact arithmetic is used when you want to turn your CAS mode off. So the CAS mode in short form basically means that you cannot do things like solve equations, differentiate things, integrate things, and that sort of thing. So anything that involves any algebra, that's what the CAS mode does. So leaving it on is of course preferred because that is what is assumed when doing VCE methods and specialist. Leaving it in exact arithmetic mode simply means that you can ask it to evaluate, for example, 2 root 7 over 14, and it will give the answer as root 7 on 7 without actually converting that into a decimal. Okay, so the next one is a vector format. Now this one is, again, mainly for the specialist math students. We want to keep it in rectangular because really the only vector system we learn in Year 12 specialist is rectangular, which is your I, J, and K. Moving on, for base, we definitely always work in decimal. We don't get to hex or binary. We're not really doing any computer science in our math courses, so we leave it at decimal. And a unit system, of course, in Australia, we use the SI units, so your kilograms, your meters, your seconds, so we leave that in SI. There's very rarely a chance you actually get to use units, but in the rare case that you do, the SI is what you want. So once you've done all that, you can tab along to the OK, like this. You tab along and press Enter, and then it will save those settings for every document that you open after that. There are ways to get the settings changed just for the document you're on, which I will get to soon. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the different applications we have. So as you can see, we have quite a few array of applications available to us on our handhelds. We have, of course, the calculator application, which is the one where most of our work gets done. We then have graphs that get to visually see all our functions and turning points and intercepts and that sort of thing. We then have geometry, which doesn't get used too much on a lot of people's handhelds, but it's a very powerful tool that can be used to talk about angles and drawing circles and that sort of thing. We then move on to lists and spreadsheet if you want to enter some data or even look at a list of X and Y values from a graph. You then have data and statistics, which can be very useful for drawing scatter plots or box plots or those sort of things. We then have notes pages, which not only can actually hold notes, but they can also hold maths boxes, which are dynamic and can change depending on the input. And you can create some really nice notes documents that help you where you put in a function and a whole bunch of things get updated based on that. And finally, we have the Vernier Data Quest. So for example, if you want to connect a motion sensor to your calculator and then verify the period or the amplitude of a pendulum swinging, then certainly the Vernier Data Quest can help with that. So once you turn your calculator on, you simply keep scrolling downwards, and then you can scroll right to go along the different applications that way. So for the majority of cases, when you turn your calculator on, the calculator page is typically the first one you enter, and then you have 1.1, and now the calculator is ready to basically start taking in any information. Like I was saying before, if you're in a calculator page or even a graphs page, a very quick way to change the angle if you do need to is you can simply use the middle trackpad to go to the RAD at the top and simply press the middle button, and it changes to degrees. This is one of the new features of the CX2. If you don't have the CX2 and you have the CX instead, then the only way to change that really would be to go to the what would be a cog up there, and you would click that, and you go to document settings, and you would change it from radius to degrees, etc. But if you have the new CX2 CAS, you simply have to press up there, and you're good to go. Now, once you're in a calculator page, let's say you're performing a calculation, you want to solve something. So menu algebra solve, for example. Solve, let's say, x squared minus 25 equals 0 for x, and you get your answer that way. Let's say you now want to say you want to show what that visually means. You're explaining quadratics for the first time, or you're learning it for the first time, and you want to visually see what those solutions mean. You can just go to a graphs page. Now, one way to open a graphs page is to go back to the home page with on and scroll down to graphs and do that. But that's a very inefficient way to do it. I'm going to go back to the document. I'm going to go to current. There are two ways we can do this. We can either press Control-I, like this, which is I for insert, and then you can press 2 to add graphs, or just press down and enter, and then you have a graphs page over there. Another way to do it as well would be Control and Doc. So Control Doc or Control I both do the same thing. They add a new page into your problem. So, for example, you get there, and then you can type in your x squared minus 25, enter, and then you can sketch your quadratic, and you can clearly see that -5 and 5 are the x-intercepts of that particular quadratic. So how do you now switch between these as you move from page to page? The easiest way to do that is press Control left or Control right. So if I want to be back in my calculator page, I press Control left to get me there. And if I want to go back to my graph, I can press Control right. If you want to see an overview of all the pages you have, you can press Control and up. So Control up gives you a quick glance at all the different maths that you have going on, whether it's a calculator page or graphs page or that sort of thing, and then you can then therefore select things that way. Another very useful feature that the calculator can do is you can draw graphs very quickly. So for example, if I want to graph y equals x squared minus 25 again, I can simply type in y equals x squared minus 25, hit enter, and then press up to highlight the previous result. And now we have something, we want the context menu. So the context menu is a right-click menu that is dynamic and depends on what you've selected. So on the handheld, control menu is our context menu. On the computer, of course, you can just do a right-click. So I've just done control menu, and the first option there is graph. Now when I click graph, there we go. It's quickly graphed this, and it's done it via a split screen, which is really awesome because when you have a split screen, you can do calculations on the left-hand side, and you can do graphs on the right-hand side as well. To ungroup them, you can basically go to Doc, go down to Page Layout, and then you can go to 8, which is ungroup. Or as you can see, you can even press Control-6 as well. So what ungroup does is it will split the two split screens apart. So if I go to ungroup, there, it's back to my calculator screen, and Control right, back to my graph screen, and I've got another graph over there as well. So plenty of things we can do there. Just a quick overview of some of the other things that we've got available. If I go Control I again, if I want to go to add geometry, in the geometry application, I can go and add things like a triangle. So I can press menu, go down to shapes, and draw a triangle, for example. And I simply have to put 3 points. I can draw a random triangle like that. I can even do things such as measure the angles inside, go all the way down to 6, and then the angle is number 4. I go enter, and I've got 3 points, and I've got an angle in there. What's beautiful about this is you can move that away, grab any of the other points, and move it around, and as you can see, that angled measurement is dynamic. So if you've got a complicated problem and you want to see how how the maths or how the triangle measurements change as you change the various parameters in the question, your geometry application is perfect for that sort of thing. Let's add a list and spreadsheet. What is in there? Well, list and spreadsheet is just like a normal Excel spreadsheet, really. I can go to A and B and label my columns. So I can call this one, for example, X values. I can go to B. I can call that a bunch of Y values, and so on and so forth. And I can fill this with data, and then use that data in a scatter plot in a data and spreadsheet, data and statistics application as well. So there's plenty over here to go on, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly go back to my calculator screen, and now we're going to talk about variables. So variables are basically objects that are in the calculator that change, that you can set to particular values, and they can change according to your preferences. There's multiple ways we can define variables. So I'll go through this problem over here on my calculator page and show you how we can effectively do it. So back to my calculator here. So one of the ways, the way that I use personally the most often is I simply type in the variable name, let's say A, and then I press Control, and then I press the template button right there. It comes up with a semicolon and an equal sign. And let's say I want to define A as the number 2. Okay, so all I get is 2 over here. If I want to verify that A is indeed 2, I can click the var button over there. So the var button basically provides a list of all the variables and functions, and even lists of numbers that are defined in the handheld's memory. So if I go to A, which is up there, you'll notice that it becomes bold. That bold is an indicator to tell you that there is something defined in that particular letter. I can press Enter, and of course it comes back as 2. So that's basically verification that the letter A has been assigned the number 2. Another way we can define a variable is we can go to Menu, and then 1 for Actions, and 1 for Define. So Menu 1, 1. If I do that, I can say define, let's say B is equal to 3. So if I want B to be 3, I go Enter, and then it says done. So I can define B to be 3 that way. And finally, let's try C equals 4. What I can do is I can press 4, which is the number that I want to be stored in the variable C. I can then press Control var. So you can see the STO arrow there. That STO means store. So I want to store 4 in the variable C, and I press Enter, and there I get 4. So now how can we use these variables in a function, for example, let's say? I can simply type in y equals a times x squared, for example. So I'm going to create a quadratic function using ax squared plus bx plus c. Before I proceed any further, I do want to make a very big note about this times over here. If I don't put the times, so let's say I go back there, and then I just press ax squared like that, you notice how the a is not bold anymore. The reason why that is the case is because there's no way for the handheld to know that a and x are different variables. Right now, with what I've inputted, it believes that a and x are actually the same variable. So in order to avoid that, you must, whenever you're talking about variables next to each other, you must put a times between them. That fixed it. I've got a as bold and times x squared. So proceeding forwards from there, plus b times x plus c. And I go Enter, and there you go. It's now given me the graph as it is over there, which is awesome. and I can also define a function that way. So normally when I define functions, I typically do f1 or f2 or anything like that, or even sometimes f of x. So f of x like this, and then I simply go control template, and then I type in the function as it is and take it from there. You can also define matrices the same way. So with matrices, let's say I have a matrix M, and I want to define it as let's say the 2 by 2 identity matrix. The quickest one way to do it is you can press the template button as I've got highlighted there, and on your calculator in the very second row of the palette that appears is a 2 by 2 matrix, and you can press enter on that, and you can type in your matrix that way. If you're a bit more astute with your keyboard, you can also type in a matrix this way. You can press Control and open bracket, and it comes up with 2 square brackets like that. So let's say I want the identity matrix. All I have to do is type in 1, 0, and then I'd have to type in the colon button. So to get the colon button, I would have to, or the semicolon button, sorry, or colon. Sorry, I keep forgetting which is which. What I've done is I've pressed the punctuation key over there. It's on the top right of the alphabet keypad. I press that, and I can keep pressing that same button until I get to the dot and the comma. And then I can type in 0, 1, enter, and it does the matrix as well. So there's multiple ways to enter a matrix. You can either use the template button, or you can use the square brackets with the appropriate combinations of commas and colons. Okay, so that finishes my work with the variables. So now let's move on to problems and pages. This is a very important concept here, especially when dealing with large extended response tasks such as SACs or even your end of year exam 2. So I want you to have a look at the top of here. We have 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. Just a quick explanation as to what's going on here. The first number, the 1 in front of the decimal point, that is talking about the problem number. So within a problem, everything that you define, every graph that you draw, it's all linked in there. So for example, if I go to 1.2 and I press tab and I press up, you'll notice that f1x, which is our function, has been defined as x squared minus 25. So if I go back to 1.1 and I type in f1 bracket x, what you'll notice is that f1 has been bolded, and I press enter, and I've got x squared minus 25. So any of these pages within problem 1 will always have f1x defined as x squared minus 25. So if you're doing an exam 2, for example, and you're doing all the multiple choice questions, you might want to do that in problem 1. You can then you can go to problem 2. So how do you start a new problem? Well, you simply have to go to doc and then down to insert. You can press 4 and then press 1 for problem. So menu for 1 gets you a new problem. And then you can add a calculator page. And what you notice is you have 2.1 over there. So what that means is anything that I do in problem 2 has nothing to do with problem 1. So as an example, you saw how f1x was defined. If I type in f1x over here, I've typed the exact same thing. I press enter, and I just get f1x over there. So now these two problems are completely detached from each other. So in typical exam 2 fashion, what you might have is question 1 might have a function for, let's say, a roller coaster, which is defined as f of x. And you go to question 2, and there'll be something else. Let's talk about maybe a water slide or some other unrelated object. And the exam also uses f of x. What you can do is you can create a new problem and then talk about f of x at the same time between the problems and without any overlap happening between them. If you don't do this, then what you'll have to do is keep deleting variables and that sort of thing, and that's not very efficient, and neither is it helpful for you because you might get confused. Just a quick note regarding variables and functions, that sort of thing. if you do want to delete something, you can press Menu, then Actions, and then Delete Variable. So Menu 1, 3, you can delete variable, and let's say I want to delete A. I press that, and there you go, A is gone. So in the rare case you do want to delete a variable, that option is available to you as well. So that is basically the best advice that we can give to you regarding problems and pages. So whenever you're dealing with a new question in an extended response task, always make sure you start a new problem. Just to remind you, that's doc, insert, and problem, menu for 1. Okay, so that's problems and pages. And now finally is shortcuts. The calculator is full of very, very useful shortcuts that can be used to shave those very valuable seconds or maybe even milliseconds when push comes to shove and time is really a factor. Now, I'm not going to try and go through all the different shortcuts. There's a very good video made by Peter Fox just a week ago or so, which talks about the top 10 shortcuts over there. There is a YouTube channel called TI Australia, and one of the most recent videos there, if not the most recent, is the top 10 shortcuts video. Yeah, so you can see the screenshot over there, and this is what it looks like. But in today's tutorial, I'll go through a few ones that you might use on a very often basis. So for example, let's say you want to quickly solve something. Menu 3, 1 is what you would use for solving. Another one you can use, so I'll try that one out. Menu 3, 1. Let's say I want to solve sine of x, just a basic trigonometric function. Sine of x equals a half for x. And it's good that we're solving this because we can then talk about how to include a domain as well. So to include a domain to these, just press Control equal. I can press left, put the given, Control equal, left, given, and then I could say 0 less than x, and then finally less than 2 pi. I can also type in pi if I wanted, and there we get that over there. Let's say you want to use this as well in a future entry line. You simply have to press up, or even you want to use the question again or change the domain. You can press that and press enter. It copies and pastes it. You can also use Control C and Control V. Another one that you might use very often, depending if you're doing calculus, for example, is Shift minus is derivative. Shift plus is integrating. For those of you that did that in the 11 method, that would be very familiar. And finally, the last one I'd like to do is Control W. Control W will pretty much close the entire document. I won't save it, and there we are. We're back to our home screen. So that concludes my section of the tutorial. Hopefully you've learned something new there and you've enjoyed it. I'll hand it over back to Brian, who will hand it to James, and we're good to go from there. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Stephen. I did type into the chat there also that Stephen was one of our expert panelists in the online student vision series that we ran at the end of last year. Attendees, if you were part of that event at all last year and you wrote into the feedback, thank you for that, because it was from the feedback that we received that many students said that they would like that series of tutorials was very useful, but they would also like to have that sort of information at the beginning of the year. I know that quite a lot of students might do methods in one year and specialist in the next. So thank you for your feedback. James.
Alrighty, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Stephen. I think I'll just also mention Stephen's point there about emphasizing and multiplying the coefficient for x squared and finding this quadratic. I find students often forget to multiply the coefficients with their variables, so that's really an important point there raised by Stephen. So the CAS calculator is actually kind of like a mini computer in your pocket. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about file management. And so to introduce another shortcut to you is the shortcut around saving your documents. Okay, so this document in front of me, is all about quadratics. So my students have recently done quite for reason I really love what I've done. I want to use my work later on. So to save this file, we need to press Control S, just like on a computer. Okay, and it comes with this pop-up menu, and it's asking me to save this file. So I'm going to call this file Quadratics, and there's a reason for that, which I'll explain soon. Right? So Control S again is a shortcut to save our file. So we've just saved that. Now, if I want to access this file, I can go back to the home page by clicking the home button, and then going to browse. If you've got the CX it might say to My Documents. The CX2 is to Browse. So in here, we have all of our folders and all of our files. Okay? So if we go all down to the bottom, we should hopefully see Quadratics. Now, the reason for quadratics is if you're studying methods and specialists, or methods and further maybe, and you're creating your files, you want to try and distinguish them so you can find them easily in the subject or easily in an assessment. So the reason for typing first and then the file name is so that all your methods files are together. And likewise for specialists, if you begin describing the file with SM, that's your specialist maths files. And you could do the same for maths for the next combination. Okay. If you want to create a folder on your CAS, you can do that by pressing the menu. So up here, by pressing menu, you've got all these options here. So number one is your new folder, which you can create. So if you don't like all those loose folders there, you can actually create a folder called methods, and you can put all your methods files in there if you want to tidy that up a bit. Okay. You could create another folder for specialists. So menu specialists. Okay. Now, if for whatever reason you're typing on your handheld and you might accidentally misspell something, so for example, I might accidentally press S next to the T, right? We can rename that folder. So if we press Control Menu, which is like an equivalent of right-click on the computer, there is all the options such as cut, copy, paste, or rename there. So we know the delete altogether, or we can rename it and give it its proper name. So similar to what Stephen alluded to beforehand, another shortcut for right-click on the CAS is Control Menu. Okay. Now, if you're working on the student software, to access all this stuff on the student software, if you go to your home computer and then into your libraries, in your documents, you might have a lot of stuff there, but eventually if you scroll down, you'll see a folder called TI-nspire CX. And in this folder, you have all the folders and files as what you would have on your CAS. So the software document sort of structure is the same as it is on your handheld structure. And we'll see soon how this relates to transferring of files. In terms of charging your battery, the best approach is to connect your CAS to your computer or laptop via the cable that came with it in the box. And a really important thing is to have the student software installed on your laptop or computer so that it recognizes your CAS calculator. You can go ahead and purchase a TI a wall adapter, like this one here in this image. It's not recommended that you use other wall adapters or other cords or cables to charge your CAS, because things might go astray with your CAS. It might damage your battery, such as what happens by here. So this, I have to thank my good friend Chris, who is attending this webinar this evening for these images. But effectively, if you use non-approved TI hardware, then damage could happen to your battery. For further information regarding charging your battery and also CAS paraphernalia, there are links in the PowerPoint which you'll get after the webinar. So in terms of transferring files and data from your PC to your handheld, the way we can go about this is upon opening up your software, on the right-hand side, you may see here that I've got showing the CAS keypad. So to actually access your files and transfer them, what we want to do is click on this yellow folder here called the Content Explorer. Okay? And what this is doing is it's showing us all the folders and files we have on our home computer, as we've just seen beforehand. So this sort of box here matches everything I've got here on my file registry. And then down below is a connected handheld I have to my computer. So if I want to transfer my files that maybe I've downloaded from the internet or from the TI website, or maybe I've downloaded via Google Drive or Dropbox, then what I can do is go into my handheld, so double click on that, and then all I need to do is from my computer section is simply click on what I want to transfer, and then I can click and drag over to my handheld. Okay? So now that's copied across onto my handheld CAS, and I'm good to go then. If I want multiple files transferred, I can click and press Control to click for more files. So they're all highlighted now. So I'm just holding down Control on my keyboard and clicking the files I want to transfer. And then once I've got those files, I can click and drag onto my handheld. And because those files are already there, yep, I can replace that. And now all those files that are on my computer are now on my handheld. That can also be true of other folders you might have. So for example, I might have a folder there, my lib. I can transfer that across just like I transferred my other files. If you don't have the student software and you're only able to transfer via the handhelds, the way we go about that is we need to connect the handhelds via a small cable. But with your best friend at school, connect up your handhelds, and then the way we transfer is we want to go to our home page on the handheld, and then go to My Documents, or even the CX2, go to Browse. Then we go to the file that we want to transfer, and what we're going to do now is press Menu, and we'll see there's an option 6 that says Send. So when the handhelds are connected, you'll be able to select that option, and you can send file from the handheld to another handheld. Because I'm using the software, I'm not able to use that particular option here. So I have to use via the Content Explorer over here. But when you have the handhelds connected, you can press that Send button right there. Okay. If there are any other questions, I'd feel free to post them in the Q&A session. But Brian, I think that's all from me right about now in terms of transferring files from PC to handheld and setting up files and folders in the My Documents on the CAS.
Terrific. Thank you there. And great stuff. And really important things with document transfer, and particularly also the battery charging. I know a lot of students it can experience grief if they're trying to charge their calculator just on their phone charger, or plugging into the computer when they don't have other TI technology installed. The TI software needs to be there so that it will recognise your TI calculator and charge it appropriately. Now, just
that's true. And also, sorry, Brian, I'll say one final point on that as well. I think it's also important for the students listening is to make sure that when your CAS is connected, don't just simply close the screen and let your computer go on standby, because if you have your computer on standby, it might actually shut off the USB connection. So make sure, like, when you're watching your Netflix or a movie or doing your homework on your computer, plug in your CAS so that it's charging.
and of course, we're hoping that everyone also has installed the student software, because that's, as you can see, the presenters are using software, and that's the easiest way to go. The handheld unit, of course, is designed for its portability and use in exams. So thank you there, James. I'll just go back to a share screen of mine. After just typing in there an answer to the query about where there will be recordings of this, and yes, it will be on our webpage. Yes, it will also be on our YouTube channel, but we've got something new, and that is a blog especially for students, and I will show you that on one of my slides in a moment. But before I do that, once again, a very big thank you to both of our presenters, Stephen and James. It's terrific for students right across, well, the world really, to be able to access expert teachers such as yourselves. They're the links to our webpage and YouTube channel, but we've got something new which I expect you'll find very exciting. This is a blog site, especially for students, so get on board with that one. Subscribe to that. We're calling it the TI Australia Student Hangout, and the address is on your screen there, TIstudents.wordpress.com. That's the first page there that you see listed, but also there'll be links to the recordings and also registrations and notification for upcoming tutorial events just for you.